Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first warm-up video for the ROLAND SH-01A video tutorial series. In this series I'm going to show you not only what the knobs and sliders do on the unit, but also how to play this as a musician. So without further ado, let's take a look at what we're going to learn. So this is the original SH101 part from Voodoo Ray by a guy called Gerald. It's a nice easy 2-bar sequence, and we'll also have a look at programming the knobs and sliders to get it to sound like that, almost kind of like an electronic tom sound. But let's have a little listen. And then if you check out my other videos, if you're lucky enough to have the TB03, let's add the bass line in as well. So the video on how to program the TB03 will be here. And then I'm lucky enough to own a TB08, so let's add all of them together. So if we play the lead and the bass line. So my timing starting the units was a bit out there because I'm not using any clock, but you get the idea behind that. So if you stay tuned and subscribe, all these videos will go up in the immediate future. So a little bit of prep work before we look at the actual tone of this patch. So if you go to menu and you press number 4 and get to the noise sound, this noise sound, if we press 1, we have it set on the original. We're going to be using a tiny little bit of noise, so just make sure you have it on original. And then if you go back to get out of menu, go back into it, press number 4 again, and then we want to go to LFO, and then enter that. We've got the LFO on the original behavior of the original SH101 unit. So just press menu again to come out, and we're pretty much ready to roll. So with the LFO, I've got no LFO on this voice or this tone, so I've got both sliders down for the low frequency oscillator. We're not going to use it at the moment to manipulate the sound, but maybe we will add a little bit of low frequency oscillator a little bit later into the tone. But for now, just make sure both sliders are down, and you may as well go ahead and just put it on the triangle wave. And then we've got the bender for the voltage control oscillator set all the way down, for the voltage control filler all the way up, and then the modulator is also all the way up. The transpose is on the medium setting, and there's no portamento because these are sort of like one short hits of each note with a little bit of release to get that sound. So for the voltage control oscillator section, which is the main source of sound for this synthesizer, we're not having any modulation from the LFO. We've got the range on 8, and we've got the pulse width all the way down. So I guess it doesn't really matter in that case where you have the effect of the pulse width coming from. At the moment I've got it on manual, so if I play a note and bring the pulse width up, you can see the effect of the characteristic it has on the sound. If I pop it onto LFO, it doesn't really do anything because we've got a very slow LFO. So if I bring the LFO rate up and then adjust the pulse width, you can see it sort of warbles with the rate of the LFO. And then if I bring it down to envelope, it's going to be affected by the envelope settings here. So let's have a little listen. Okay, but for the moment let's have the pulse width set all the way down. If we did want to modulate the voltage control oscillator with the low frequency oscillator, this is what we would get. But obviously that doesn't sound what we want, so let's keep the LFO down and the modulation down and the pulse width down for now. Now the pulse width that I've just talked about only affects the square wave. So if you've got no square wave in the mix on your patch or your tone, then the pulse width won't work. So I'll give you an example here. Let's get a good pulse width going. Let's use a manual pulse width, and then let's take out the square wave out of the source mixer, and then we get no pulse width whatsoever, if that makes sense. So we've always got to have some square wave in the source mixer to get us some pulse width, if that makes sense. So let's just slide the pulse width back to 0 for the moment. So with the source mixer, if I take everything down to 0, this is what it will sound like. Okay, so what I want to do is bring the saw wave all the way up, the square wave all the way up, the saw wave to about there, and then we want a bit of sub oscillator all the way up, and then this is where you can sort of use this as a high pass or low pass filter, but really what we're doing is just changing the octaves on the sub oscillator. So with 1 octave down, 2 octaves down, and then 2 octaves down again. Doesn't really make much difference on that one, but you can see we can add a bit of bass to this line, but we don't want it to conflict with the 808 kick bass drum that we're going to add in a later video. So let's just keep it at 1 oscillator down for the sub oscillator, just so we've got a nice little bit of bass. And then I've got a little bit of noise, the original noise on the SH101, just to give it a bit of bite. Noise all the way up doesn't quite work, so let's keep it at about 15-20%. Obviously you can tweak this to your heart's content. Now the reason the 2 octaves down with the narrower pulse width doesn't make much difference to the sound is because I've got no pulse width. So let's add a bit of pulse width. I've got it set on manual, and then let's go 2 octaves down, and then 2 octaves down with a narrower pulse width. You can see what characteristic it has on the sound there. So let's just put it back to 1 octave down and get rid of the pulse width for now. And then we move on to the voltage control filter. This is where it can color the brightness and thickness of the sound. So if we have a little play with these sliders, you'll see how it affects the sound. So the frequency, we get higher and open up the filter, or we close up the filter. So let's just have it, just so we get that nice little ringy kind of, it's kind of like a steel drum, isn't it, more than toms. And then the resonance we've got all the way up, which just adjusts the resonance at the point the filter cuts off. So let's just have a play with that. So we can have really bassy sounds, or we can bring a bit more of that resonance on the filter. And then the envelope. So with the envelope, this controls the voltage control filter depending on the attack, delay, sustain and release settings of the envelope, only if you've got the voltage control amplifier set to envelope. So we can use the envelope to affect the filter. So with the no envelope, obviously we get close to the original sound, but if we add the characteristics of the attack, decay, sustain and release, we can get those like shooty zappy sounds, but we don't want that. If we just put it to gate, we just have no on, no off with no envelope characteristics at all, but we don't want that. We do want to have the voltage control amplifier on envelope, but we want the envelope, the amount the envelope affects the filter to be all the way down to 0. Now modulation is how much the LFO affects the filter. We're not using any LFO, so if we did have it up, we could use the LFO to modulate the sound, but we don't want that, so we'll slide that all the way down. And then with keyboard, whichever note lower or higher you play on your keyboard will affect the filter. So let's go for a really low note, bear with me, and let's go for a high note. So you can see the brightness of the sound is affected by which note you play on the keyboard. Let's go back to that original E. So if we have no effects of the keyboard, all the notes are the same, like color or tone. But if we put this up to about 75%, when we play the different notes, it's only very slight, but it does make a little bit of a difference to the tone. Now with the voltage control amplifier, we will look at that in future videos, but for now we'll just keep it on envelope. So with the envelope, we've got the attack set all the way down, so note comes in as soon as I press attack, as soon as I press the key, sorry. Obviously higher the attack slider, the more slowly the sound comes in. The decay is when I hold the note down, how long the sound disappears regardless of how long I hold the note down. So holding the note down, again holding the note down, increase it, holding the note down, it decays to the setting of the slider. Then the sustain is how long it sustains on the note being held. So a very long time on the sustain there. And you can see the sustain is sort of delaying when the decay occurs, but we don't want that, so put the sustain all the way down. And then the release is how long the sound lasts after I've let go of the note, and this is really helpful when we program the sequence, so we don't have to put any ties in. We just adjust how long the note lasts based on the envelope. So with no release, it just disappears when I let go of the key on the keyboard, which is a bit like having the voltage control amplifier on gate. So if I add the release there but put this on gate, the sound just comes on straight away as soon as I press the key and goes off. But obviously we'll look at that in a future video. Let's just put this on envelope and then release about there. So that's basically the tone done, and we'll have a little look on how to sequence the notes. So when it comes to putting a sequence into the unit, it's quite simple. Well, this sequence is quite simple anyway. It's just, we're going to just use notes on the MIDI keyboard I've got across the room there, and we're going to use the rest button. So this is a 2-bar pattern or sequence over 32 steps. So we're going to load in this sequence, and when it gets to 33, we're going to stop. If you already had a 100-step sequence in there, because when you load, you stop at 32 or it advances to 33, it's only going to play from step 1 to step 32. So if we press load, and we're good to put the notes in, and we're going to start obviously with step 1. So if I have my finger ready over the rest button, and then I go to my MIDI keyboard across the way here, we're going to go down an octave from middle C, and on step 1 is an E, so just tap the note in, and then 2, 3 and 4 are rests. 5 is the same E again. 6, 7 and 8 are rests. 6, 7 and 8. 9 is now up to the C sharp. 10 and 11 are rests. 12 is the same C sharp. 13 and 14 are rests, so 13, 14, and 15 is down to the closest A. 16, 17 and 18 are rests, so 16, 17 and 18 are rests. I hope I'm not going too fast. 19 is the A again, and then 20 and 21 are rests. 22 is the A again, and then 23 and 24 rests, so 23, 24, just pressing the rest button, number 7, and then 25 is the G down from the A, and then 26, 27 and 28 are rests. 26, 27, 28. 29 is a G, the same G, and 30, 31 and 32 are rests. Don't forget those last rests. And then 32 takes us to 33. We're not going to enter anything on 33, so just press the load button and we're good to go. So we should have, if we press play, just stop that. Okay, so that's our sequence programmed in. Before we lose it, let's save it. Now I like to save the sequence or the pattern on the same similar bank, bank and slot number as the corresponding tone. So let's go to menu this time and press 2, and then that brings up the patterns. We're not going to load them, so I'm already on bank 8 there and slot 1. Now I'm not going to just tap and press it, because that will erase what we've done and load in the pattern that was already in there. I'm going to long press, wait till it flashes, let go, and then always just take it back out of menu. Even if you're going to do something else within that thing, just get into the habit of taking it out of menu so you don't mess anything up, and that's job done. So now if we want to tweak it a little bit, now we've got the sequence running and we can get a better idea of the sound as the notes play, and we get all the notes overlapping and whatnot. Let's just play it. Now let's just add a little bit of pulse width, and I've got it set on manual, and obviously that's based on the fact that I've got a lot of well, I've got all the square wave there. The pulse width manipulates the square wave. And then let's just add a bit of LFO to the voltage control filter. Only very subtly, just to control the a bit of modulation on the filter. There we go. That seems to be a bit more on the mark. Just adjusting the frequency of the filter there. And let's just add a bit more. Let's just take off a bit of the filter modulation. Anyway, I digress. We're 90% there. If you listen to the original and compare this, no way is it going to sound the same, but it's recognizable enough as a tone. However, you can play around with to your heart's content. You might even get a better result than me. But again, this was just a warm-up video, the introduction onto the SH-01A. Obviously, we'll be going through the unit in a lot more detail, but most importantly, we're going to go through how to play this, because that's the ultimate goal at the end of the day. It's music, it's entertainment, it's not mathematics. So again, thank you for watching. Please subscribe just so it makes sure that you stay posted, and I'll see you next time.